"Don't look at me," the boy whispered to the river, pulling his torn jacket tighter as the cold gnawed at his bones. "Just let me get through the night." At 10 years old, Lucas Moreno had already learned what most adults never do: how invisible a human being can become. Every night he slept beneath a concrete bridge on the edge of the city, curled against damp stone, listening to cars pass overhead like a world that refused to slow down for him. He had no mother to call his name, no father waiting with open arms, only memories that blurred with hunger. His mother had died when he was 5. His father had faded long before that, existing only as promises that never came back. Lucas survived on what the city threw away: half-eaten bread pulled from trash bins, rainwater collected in broken bottles. On cold nights he burned scraps of wood just to feel his fingers again. His body was small for his age, ribs pressing sharply against thin skin, but his eyes carried something heavier: years of loss compressed into a child's stare. Under that bridge lived others too: old Mateo, whose grief smelled of cheap alcohol, and Elena, a woman hollowed out by nights she never spoke about. They were a broken family, stitched together by cold and silence. Lucas watched people like them disappear, taken away by ambulances or police cars, while the city walked past without looking. Hunger was constant. Fear was normal. Indifference was expected. Yet somewhere inside, Lucas, buried beneath survival instincts and street-learned caution, lived something fragile and dangerous, a heart that still believed life could mean more than just making it to the next morning. And that fragile belief was the only thing the streets had not managed to steal. The forest was never meant to be quiet. That morning, as Lucas Moreno pushed deeper between the trees, the city's noise faded behind him, replaced by the soft crack of branches under his bare feet. He was there for one reason only: to find dry wood. The night before had been merciless, the kind of cold that settles into your lungs and makes every breath feel sharp. If he didn't bring back firewood, old Mateo wouldn't survive another night. Then Lucas heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was a muffled cry, desperate, broken, cut short, as if someone were fighting not to be heard. Lucas froze. Every lesson the streets had taught him screamed the same warning run. Strange sounds meant danger. Danger meant people who hurt you and walked away without consequences. His feet turned ready to obey, but then the sound came again, faint, panicked, human. Lucas swallowed hard and moved toward it, each step heavier than the last. The forest thickened, shadows pressing in until he saw it. A man tied tightly to a tree, wrists bound behind his back, gray tape sealing his mouth. His face was bruised, blood dried along his temple, his skin tinged blue from struggling to breathe. The man's eyes found Lucas. They widened not with fear, but with hope, so raw it hurt to look at. Lucas's heart pounded. He could leave. No one would blame him. He was just a homeless child, small and starving, invisible to the world. This wasn't his problem. Then recognition struck like lightning. The man's face. Lucas had seen it everywhere. On billboards, on magazines, on towering buildings downtown. Adrian Velez, the billionaire who owned half the city. The man who passed children like Lucas behind tinted windows, never once looking down. For a single moment, Lucas hesitated. And in that moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether a boy who had nothing left would still choose to give something no one had ever given him: courage. Lucas's hands were shaking, not from the cold this time, but from the weight of the choice pressing down on his chest. The streets had taught him one rule above all others: mind your own suffering. People who stopped to help rarely survived long. People who interfered disappeared. He was small, barefoot, weak. This man was powerful, rich, someone the world already cared about. Someone who didn't need a boy like him. Lucas took one step back. Then he looked into Adrian Velez's eyes again. There was no money there. No power. No distance between billionaire and beggar. There was only terror, raw animal terror, and a silent plea that crossed every line Lucas had ever known. In that gaze, Lucas didn't see a rich man. He saw someone about to die, and something inside him broke open. Lucas rushed forward and clawed at the tape sealing Adrian's mouth. It was thick, cruelly tight. His fingers slipped nails, tearing skin, burning. When the tape finally ripped free, Adrian sucked in air like it was the first breath of his life. Water, he rasped. Please. Lucas had none. Instead, he went for the ropes. The knots were tight, professional. Whoever tied them had taken their time. Lucas pulled with everything he had. His arms screamed. His fingers bled. He used his teeth when his hands failed, jaw aching as fibers tore apart. The forest echoed with hurried breathing and the soft, panicked whisper of time running out. "They'll come back," Adrian whispered, voice shaking. "An hour. Maybe less." Lucas worked faster. One rope gave. Then another. Adrian collapsed forward, legs numb, body heavy and broken. He was far too big for Lucas to move, far too injured to stand. Still, Lucas slid an arm under the man's shoulder and pulled. Step by step, inch by inch, the boy who had dragged firewood heavier than himself through alleyways now dragged a life out of the forest. His lungs burned, his legs trembled. Fear chased him with every crack of a branch. But Lucas didn't stop, because for the first time in his life he wasn't just surviving. He was saving someone. By the time they reached the edge of the road, Lucas Moreno could barely feel his legs. They didn't walk so much as stagger Lucas, half dragging, half holding Adrian Velez, whose weight felt impossible for a 10-year-old body. Adrian's arm was slung over the boy's narrow shoulders, his blood soaking through Lucas's torn jacket. Every few steps the man stumbled, gasping in pain, his knees threatening to fold beneath him. Cars passed, fast, loud, close. Headlights swept over them for a second, then vanished. Drivers slowed just enough to stare at a filthy child and a bleeding man before accelerating again. No one stopped. No one asked. No one rolled down a window to help. To the city, they were just another uncomfortable scene best forgotten. Lucas didn't look up anymore. He focused on the ground, on breathing, on moving forward. Fear pressed against his spine. Any moment the kidnappers could return. Any moment this fragile escape could collapse. "I need a hospital," Adrian murmured, his voice barely holding together. "They broke something." Lucas didn't know where hospitals were. He didn't know street names or maps. But he knew one thing: the police station near the market. The place where officers chased him away when he lingered too long near trash bins. "This way," Lucas said quietly. They moved again. People passed, within inches of them. Well-dressed, clean, busy eyes sliding away, as if the pair didn't exist. A child helping a wounded man should have stopped the world. Instead, it barely caused a ripple. When they finally reached the police station, the glass doors swung open and chaos followed. Officers froze. Voices rose. Someone recognized Adrian instantly. Radios crackled. An ambulance was called. Questions flew through the air. And through it all, Lucas stood there, small, barefoot, shaking. No one spoke to him. No one asked his name. No one asked how he'd survived the forest, or why his hands were bleeding. To them, he was just background noise, a shadow beside a headline. Lucas slowly stepped backward, ready to disappear again, ready to return to the bridge where no one noticed him anyway. Then a hand closed around his wrist. Firm, gentle, human. "Wait!" Adrian said, his voice hoarse but certain. "Don't go." For the first time that day, someone saw the boy who had refused to look away. Adrian's fingers tightened around Lucas Moreno's wrist, as if letting go would send the boy back into the shadows forever. "What's your name?" Adrian asked, his voice weak but urgent, eyes fixed on the child who had carried him out of death itself. Lucas hesitated. Names didn't matter on the street. Names didn't protect you. "Lucas," he said finally, barely above a whisper. Lucas Adrian repeated, as if committing it to memory. "You saved my life." The words felt too heavy, too large to belong to someone like him. Lucas shrugged, eyes dropping to the floor. "I was just there," he murmured. "Anyone would have done it." But they both knew that wasn't true. Hundreds of people had passed by. Only one child had stopped. Sirens wailed outside as paramedics rushed in, lifting Adrian onto a stretcher. Officers crowded around, voices sharp with urgency now that they knew who had been hurt. A billionaire kidnapped, a ransom, a manhunt. Lucas stood frozen at the edge of it all, already preparing to disappear again, his body instinctively turning toward the door. Adrian noticed. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he asked suddenly. "Yes," Lucas lied. Adrian studied him, bare feet, blackened by dirt bones visible beneath thin skin, a jacket held together by hope more than fabric. "No, you don't," he said gently. There was no judgment in his voice, only recognition. "This isn't your concern," Lucas snapped, fear rising like a shield. Caring was dangerous. Trust was worse. "You're right," Adrian replied quietly. "It wasn't my concern either, until you made it my concern when you chose to help me." The words landed softly, but stayed. As the stretcher began to move, Adrian reached out again, refusing to let the moment pass. "I was supposed to die today," he said. "They asked for 10 million. They would have killed me when time ran out. You gave me a second chance." Lucas didn't know what to do with that truth. At the hospital, doctors took Adrian away, voices echoing down white corridors. An exhausted social worker finally noticed Lucas draping a blanket over his shoulders, placing water and food into hands that didn't quite know how to accept them. But the question lingered. What happens to the boy now? From his hospital bed, ribs fractured and body aching, Adrian made a decision that surprised even himself. He called his lawyer, then another. He requested a private social worker. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Because wealth had once meant power numbers control, but now it meant responsibility. And for the first time in his life, Lucas Moreno was not being sent away. He was being chosen. The penthouse was too quiet. For Lucas Moreno, silence no longer meant safety. It meant danger. The bed beneath him was softer than anything he had ever known, wide enough to swallow the space where fear used to curl his body tight. Yet every night his eyes snapped open, heart-racing, lungs burning, convinced the ceiling would dissolve into concrete and he would be back under the bridge again. "Lucas, it's okay," Adrian Velez would whisper, sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapping steady arms around a child, shaking from memories that refused to loosen their grip. Lucas would cling to him, fingers digging into fabric, afraid that if he let go, the warmth would disappear like everything else in his life had. Food was everywhere now. Too much. Plates filled and refilled, untouched. Lucas stared at meals with suspicion, waiting for the moment someone would say, "That's enough. You owe me now." Every gift felt like a debt. Every kindness felt temporary. When Adrian offered him new clothes, Lucas asked quietly, "What do I have to do?" Adrian froze. "Nothing," he said carefully. "You don't have to do anything." Lucas didn't believe him. Trust didn't come easily to a child raised by hunger and abandonment. When Adrian spoke gently, Lucas waited for anger. When Adrian raised his voice on the phone, Lucas flinched, ready to run. He kept his shoes beside the door at night, just in case, and Adrian noticed everything. He noticed how Lucas hid food under pillows, how he never turned his back completely, how he slept lightly like someone always listening for footsteps. And instead of demanding change, Adrian waited. He had learned patience in the forest, learned it with rope cutting into his wrists, and death breathing close enough to hear. If that moment had taught him anything, it was this: forcing control only breaks what is already fragile. "You saved my life," Adrian told Lucas often. "Let me take care of yours." Weeks passed, then months. Slowly, something shifted. Lucas stopped asking what the price was. He began to eat without fear. To laugh hesitantly at first, like the sound might be taken away. One night after Adrian tucked him in, Lucas spoke without looking up. "You're not going to send me away, are you?" Adrian knelt beside the bed, eyes shining. "Never," he said. "You're my son now. Not because you saved me, but because you belong." Lucas closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he slept through the night, not because the world was safe, but because someone had chosen to stay. Adrian Velez healed slowly. Bones mended. Bruises faded. The doctors were satisfied. But something inside him had been permanently altered in a way no scan could measure. At night, long after the penthouse lights dimmed, Adrian would sit alone by the window, staring down at the city he once believed he owned. From above, it looked calm, ordered, controlled. He knew better now. "I was so close," he confessed one evening, voice low, almost ashamed. Lucas sat beside him, knees tucked to his chest. I could feel death breathing next to me, and the person who came wasn't my security team, wasn't my money. It was you. Lucas said nothing. He listened the way children who have seen too much always do, quietly, fully. Adrian began to notice the city differently after that. He noticed the children at traffic lights, the bodies curled in doorways, the faces everyone else trained themselves not to see. Each one felt uncomfortably familiar. Each one carried the echo of a boy in a forest who had chosen courage without reward. He started small, quietly, no press, no speeches. A shelter funded here, a school meal program there, a legal fund for children without families. And every decision passed through one silent question. What would have saved Lucas sooner? Lucas watched it all with cautious curiosity. "Why are you doing this?" he asked one afternoon, as they visited a small center filled with children who looked like shadows of his past. Adrian didn't answer right away. He knelt to tie the shoe of a girl who had none that morning. Then he looked at Lucas and said, "Because my money used to be just numbers. Now it has faces." Healing moved in both directions. Lucas began to speak more freely about the bridge, about old Mateo, about nights when hunger felt louder than fear. Adrian listened without trying to fix the memories, understanding that some wounds don't need solutions. They need witnesses. "I used to think being strong meant never needing anyone," Adrian admitted once. "That forest taught me I was wrong." Lucas nodded. "I thought needing someone meant they'd leave." They sat with that truth between them. Together, they learned something rare, that rescue is never one-sided. The boy who had been discarded by the world had given a powerful man purpose. The man who had everything had given a child safety. Neither had healed alone, and quietly, without realizing it, they were building something far bigger than a second chance. They were building a reason to believe the world could still be changed, one brave, ordinary choice at a time. Years passed quietly at first, then all at once. Lucas Moreno grew taller, stronger. The sharp edges of survival softened into something steadier, but they never disappeared. Adrian watched him from a distance he learned was necessary, letting the boy become himself, not a reflection of gratitude or debt. Lucas went to school, then excelled. He stayed up late reading while the city slept, driven by a restlessness. Adrian recognized the need to make meaning out of pain. "Why law?" Adrian asked one night as Lucas spread books across the dining table. Lucas didn't hesitate. "Because kids like me don't lose because they're wrong," he said quietly. "They lose because no one speaks for them." Adrian nodded, throat tight. Lucas entered law school with the same determination he once used to survive the streets. He studied harder than anyone else, not for prestige, not for money, but because every page felt like a promise to the boy he used to be. When classes became overwhelming, he remembered the forest, the ropes, the choice. And he kept going. After graduation, Lucas didn't chase corporate firms or comfortable offices. He chose courtrooms where the air felt heavy with neglect. He defended children no one else wanted to represent. He fought systems that treated poverty like a crime. One case became 10. 10 became hundreds. Then thousands. Adrian grew older, watching this unfold, not with pride alone, but awe. By the time Adrian passed away at 72, Lucas was 32 and had already helped change laws, open shelters, and rescue more than 2,000 children from the streets. On the day of the funeral, Lucas stood at the podium, hands steady, voice calm. "He saved me," Lucas said. "But the truth is I saved him first. We saved each other." In the will, Adrian left everything to Lucas. The fortune made headlines. Speculation followed. But money no longer held power over Lucas the way it once had over Adrian. He had already learned its true purpose. Lucas established the Velez Foundation, dedicating it to children without homes, protection, or voices. Education, legal defense, food, safety. Hope not as charity, but as dignity. Sometimes late in the evening, Lucas returned to the bridge where it all began. He didn't go alone. He went with food, with names, with open hands. He looked for children who still believed they were invisible, and when he found them, he knelt, met their eyes, and spoke the words that had once changed his life. You matter. And this isn't the end of your story, because Lucas had learned something the world often forgets. A single act of courage can echo through generations, and the boy who once saved a man in the forest had grown into a man who saved the world one child at a time. As the years folded gently into memory, Lucas Moreno often returned, sometimes in thought, sometimes in body, to that moment in the forest. Not to the fear, not to the ropes or the blood, but to the choice. He had been small, hungry, afraid, invisible. And yet when the world asked nothing of him, he gave everything, standing now as a man shaped by love loss and responsibility. Lucas understood the truth. Most people spend a lifetime avoiding life is not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we answer. A cry, a need, a moment where walking away would be easier. Courage, he learned, was never about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear. He had saved a billionaire once, but what truly mattered was what followed. The lives lifted, the systems changed, the children who no longer slept, wondering if anyone would notice if they disappeared. Lucas never believed he was extraordinary. He believed he had simply listened when someone cried out, and that he knew was something anyone could do. This story reminds us of something deeply human and painfully simple. You don't need power, money, or strength to change a life. You only need a heart willing to respond. Kindness is not weakness. Courage is not loud. And doing the right thing often begins when no one is watching. One moment, one decision, one act of compassion, that is how destinies change. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever heard a silent cry and chosen to respond? Share your thoughts or your own story in the comments. If you believe kindness still matters, like this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach hearts that need them. Because somewhere right now, someone is hoping someone like you will listen.